The word death brings a chill down our spine. We're scared to talk or know more about it, but it still takes over everybody without mercy, and there isn't any escape. Patients who had near-death episodes have shared plenty of interesting experiences, which is sometimes unbelievable in this logical world. Science believes that these experiences or sensations cannot be considered evidence of the afterlife. Death is considered to be a process, and at the moment, science can only anticipate what happens after you are dead. Let's see what happens to us physically during death, per science. While dying, parts of your neural net begin to close down because of oxygen limitation. Other networks resort to emergency prevention procedures as death takes over more and more. The brain makes up by discharging signals in an attempt to animate itself back to proceed with life. As these last areas fire, recollections and dreams flood the psyche in a downpour of commotion as the final segments endeavor to overhaul itself. Think of a city losing power and the inhabitants moving batteries around to try and keep the lights on. More and more of the individual fade into the deep, silent sleep of death, returning once more to the blank nothingness where our consciousness came from before we were born. If death is measured in an IQ sense, we slowly devolve into a primordial state where only basic senses and perceptions are present. And when those final flickers dwindle, only small static sparks of circuitry fire with nowhere to connect to. Like a meaningless voice in a dark ocean, the silence finally claims those too, and thus pronounced dead. Now comes the interesting part of what happens to us after death. Patients who have witnessed near-death experiences have described a sensation of a bright, warm, welcoming light that draws people towards it. That's interesting. And some people describe a sensation of experiencing their deceased relatives, almost as if they have come to welcome them. They often say that they didn't want to come back to life in many cases. It is so comfortable, and it is like a magnet that draws them that they don't want to come back. Few others describe a sensation of separating from themselves and watching doctors and nurses working on them. And some of them describe a sensation where they review everything that they have done, finally getting into a blank white space. But again, science has its own way of answering these moments of death of near-death patients. They say it's nothing but the brain just scanning itself as a survival technique, nothing more. And it sounds convincing too. Knowing these moments of death is quite interesting, isn't it? But we have missed our body, which was left in the coffin. Let's see what happens to our body, which we wore for years together. Inside the coffin, individual nerve cells may even continue firing for quite some time. However, they lack the energy that they need to coordinate themselves and lose the patterns that are required to direct all of the other processes that keep the machinery going. Finally, chemicals begin to break down as decomposition and new microbe life takes over. The body continues to shut down and decay. Cell by cell will start to break down and turn to liquid within the skin and shell of what you once were. The body will start to swell some from putrefaction, and then the tissue turns to a liquid sludge to evaporate. Through time, your body loses all the tissue, and only the bones are left, which also start to break down and turn into a sort of dust or substance that looks like it. Again, over time, you are simply dusting, with a few chips of bone. Your atoms escape the coffin, or into another something that is created from more atoms. External forces of destruction, from sunlight to bacteria to bugs, break apart or snatch proteins. We are no longer an organism and become an environment for life much smaller than our own. Everyone in this world will go through this at the end, and there is no escape. After all, death will take over everyone, and it is nothing to be afraid of. To watch more of this stuff, please watch our channel, Infograin.in.